Exactly. Thanks for agreeing to talk with me. I really appreciate it. It's so cool that you're a speculative fiction author also.
Yeah, no problem.
How long have you been writing?
That's the best question ever. I've been writing, I mean, since I was a little kid, but like professional writing for about 9 years.
What do you consider professional writing?
Writing where you actually like submit to things and get paid.
Right?
Yeah.
What was it like? What was your first publication? What kind of story was it?
My first speculative fiction story was with Quantum Muse. So, and they don't pay, so I guess I shouldn't even say that. But because they're like a network of authors, so they'll either approve or disapprove, but you get lots of feedback, and they kind of help you kind of go along. But it was a story told from the perspective of a mushroom.
Well, that's interesting.
It was, but you don't find out until like the end. So I don't know where that came from in me. It was really fun. I like doing different types of stories from different perspectives.
That's what I noticed about you when I did a little bit of research. I don't do any research really, but I checked out your website, and that led me down various paths. And you are interesting, right? You have a very active imagination. Getting out there, you sing, right?
Yeah. I don't know. I have a lot of creative energies that are hard to hone in on because I have so many different paths that I want to take all at once.
Yeah, because you're not just a speculative fiction author either. I mean, you write other stuff as well. What else do you write? I know I just saw today, or on the 20th, you said you're going to do comic books, potentially, or wanted to, or eventually, but speculative fiction, potentially comic books. What else is there?
Yeah, the comic book thing was definitely something I really wanted to do. My husband's a comic illustrator or a comic book artist, and
but he is. Your husband is.
He's a little disenchanted with it. He hasn't done any like work in a while, except for some like favors for friends. But he was big in the indie scene about 10 years ago, and so he had a good run with that, but he burnt out real fast. So we were going to do a comic together, and then he kind of backed out, and I was thinking about doing it with a couple of other friends who are really talented artists. Eric Wilson, who's done work for Stephen King, we were talking, but it just kind of got pushed on the back burner because I also do children's, and children's with fiction is so much fun because you can just take that anywhere. And then I do some nonfiction too, which is, I love writing about other writers and just about the creative process.
Right, me too. Well, not writing about it, but necessarily talking about people's creative process is incredibly interesting, right? We come up with ideas. I mean, yeah, you write a story, you have no clue where it's going to end up, and it's a mushroom, right? It's like, where does the idea germinate from? Because I mean, you have to have. I'm working on a story right now. In fact, right now on one of my monitors is a rough draft so bad Grammarly is just red. It just looks red. It says, this isn't even quantifiable. We're not even going to give you a score on this yet until you put some effort into it, buddy. That's basically how things start, right? And then you start chipping away at it. Start chipping words out and sentences and just regrouping things and finding, hey, there's a character here and stretching that out a little bit. And next thing you know, you're a fungi.
Yeah, well, we have to have the shitty first draft. That's what some of us call it. It's your shitty first draft, and it's going to suck, and you just have to write it and get it ready. I don't like writing on computers, at least not speculative fiction. Really? It's a longhand. I need a notebook, and it's like
impressive.
papyrus and a quill.
Really? Seriously? Papyrus? You make your own paper with reed? Break it down?
I haven't done it in a long time. I made paper when I was a teenager. I made my own paper, and it was like recycled paper, but.
Mm-hmm. But you like the act of sitting down and actually putting your words on paper with your hand.
Yes, it's like meditation. It's like this big spiritual moment where you're pouring your energies out onto this physical aspect of life, and you're trying not to destroy yourself.
Do you ever let anybody look at your drafts? Can you read your own writing easily? Is it pretty? Do you work on your penmanship? Is that important to you? Do you have pretty penmanship or neat?
It's very bad.
Is it bad?
Well, I like to write in cursive, and I write really fast, and I'm dyslexic. So when
Dyslexic.
yes, very much. So when I show my
So really, honestly, you're like me. You should never be writing anything longhand. If I haven't tried, I get so excited that it's kind of like eventually it just looks like my blood pressure, being monitored. It looks like it does not look like writing. I have been insulted by people with my writing. I'm like, dude, what is this? This looks like a child. A doctor once looked at my handwriting and said it looks like a child wrote this. I was like, oh my God, this is horrible. I've never done anything to fix it. And I would never write a story longhanded either. It's really impressive that you do. So once you actually get it on paper, is that where you end up with the mushroom? Or
the mushroom story, I knew I wanted it to be a mushroom. I was like, what has been done yet? And everything's been done in writing. But I was like, what if we're like writing the story from the perspective of this like blind, deaf, and dumb creature, but it can still feel, and it kind of absorbs the energies around it.
I am so fascinated by that grouping of things, mushrooms, fungi. The idea that it could be something more. You know what I mean? It's like it could be a life form with a consciousness, really easily.
Well, and I don't know. We were really sick at the beginning of like March at like house when we were under quarantine before everybody else was quarantined because we knew we had something really bad. Yeah. But I wrote this weird story while I was like half awake, and it was I wanted to write this story that incorporated how tree roots can communicate with each other because that's a real science.
Yeah.
So I wrote this story, and I used to be into music. Well, I'm still into music, but I used to be a singer, so I had this character.
You still are, right? I see you have videos up. That's one of the only videos that I watch is that you sang with your daughters. There's nothing with you singing a solo, but I know that you're a singer because you actually have videos out there that show you singing.
Yeah, but that's more just for fun now. Like I was actively pursuing music in my late teens and early 20s and all throughout that time, but I kind of pulled back after the industry bit me in the butt. So
that's the industry in all regards, right? It's out for itself.
The publishing industry has been a lot nicer to me than music ever was, though, and I'm very grateful for that.
So it's very interesting. Like the largest organism on the planet is actually a root system tree, right? What is it? What tree is that? A Joshua tree or something along those lines? It's just.
You know what? I think I keep wanting to say acacia tree, but I know that's completely wrong. And I have it in my notes somewhere, but I'm really bad with names. I'm a writer and I'm bad with names. I'm good at.
Why wouldn't you be? Write them down, right? Once you write it down, then you know. And if you mess it up like me, you do a Control F and it'll show you all the ones that you spelled right and not all the ones that you spelled wrong.
Find
something I do all the time.
Friend.
What is that?
The find function, like searching for words and terms just to remind myself, is my best friend when I'm writing. And I'm typing up drafts, really.
Yeah. Are you so do you have a problem with typing or computers? Or neither or both?
We've come a long way. I used to, if I walked by a computer, it would crash. My sister used to joke that I just have too much magic in me to be around computers. But eventually, I've had to like kind of sit down and really get into it because I do technical writing as well for a local company. So that's my like main meat of writing, where I get to earn enough money to live.
It's important.
It is, but with the technical writing, you can't longhand that. You have to be in the computer system on the back end, typing up everything for this company and getting it out there on their website. So I've had to learn a lot along the way, which I'm okay with that. I love to learn new things. That's part of the creative process is, expanding your mind and reaching new levels. But it took a little time.
I couldn't imagine doing longhand. I completely on the computer. Every single draft. I mean, that's basically where everything comes out is right there on our computer.
Well, for me, longhanding it, not beyond the like spiritual and the hoo-ha talk. I'm not fully ambidextrous, but sometimes I'll get a spurt and I'll wake up and I'm like left-handed. So some stories I write left-handed, and some I write right-handed. And I don't know how I would handle that if I were just typing on a computer. Like, it's part of my process now that, oh, I woke up left-handed today, I have to write the story now.
That's fascinating. I think actually it's really important to work those opposite muscles, things that you really can't do with your left hand, make yourself do them. I really challenged myself while I was developing a lot of stories. I mean, I developed a lot of stories. I give credit to the fact that I was using my left hand a lot of times for things that I would normally use my right hand for, brushing teeth, cutting things, eating, things that you would normally just stab yourself in the face trying. I would try to really get good at it.
The passage in the brain, I really believe that, like, we were given two hands for a reason. I mean, why not use them and see where your brain goes?
Yeah, try to draw with your left hand, write out some stories. I mean, I guess I do write a little bit with my left hand. I won't do it with my right hand, but I'll do it with my left hand. I'll write a little tiny bit. It feels good, right? It feels like you're scratching something that's been covered for a while.
It does.
So
my favorite stories was written left-handed. One of the favorites that I've written. So
do you write long work? Do you write novels, or is it mainly just short fiction?
I am mainly a short fiction writer. I have written a few novels, but they're just not being well received by any of the indie publishers I shop around with. And me and self-publishing, where, you know, I think it's right for some people, but I don't think that I could possibly do that with being dyslexic. And I have a few editors in my pocket, but the marketing stuff is hard. And so
stuff is hard. But I even wonder how much the marketing stuff even matters.
Well, yeah.
I don't know. Right? I mean, it just doesn't, I don't know. It's just like, it is a computer thing. It's a language system that you either know or you don't know. And if you don't know it, it's kind of like, I mean, we get into this being quarantine thing. You either follow the rules as they tell it to you, or you understand why you're doing it. Sometimes it's both. Sometimes it's one or the other, right?
Well, and that's driving me nuts, because I prefer in-person marketing. You know, I like to do book signings. I like to do book tours. And I haven't been able to tour in a couple of years because I had my youngest child, and he's almost 2. So I was ready this year to get out there, and I had all these places I was going to go. And then this happened, and a lot of them just started canceling, and pretty soon everyone pulled out. And I was like,
I think New York Comic Con's canceled, and that's October. I'm not sure about that one necessarily. I know San Diego's done. There's no San Diego. So, I mean, that means all the other small cons are like canceling too. What can you do? So you got out there, you were doing in-person meet and greets with people?
I love it. I love getting out. I'm the typical, like, reclusive writer. Like, I used to be a musician, and I like being around people. That's why I like doing creative things, because I have a lot of energy, and I like build that energy based on who I'm talking to. And you have these great experiences where you meet these interesting people who just, they want to open up to you and tell you their stories.
Right. It's interesting to me because I write a lot of short fiction too. I'm different in that I do want to get stuff published. I feel like there's a little bit of dyslexia in me too, because I make mistakes all the time. I'm like, damn it, how the hell did I do that? I published a bunch of stuff, a couple things myself, like 3 stories altogether. One was a short story just because, and then one was the actual novel that I'm going to republish again this September, and a short story collection. And in each time that I did so, I made a lot of mistakes. Like, it was messy, messy work. And you look back on it, even as you're hitting send, you're like, this is fine. But no, it's completely garbage. At the end of the day, it's embarrassing garbage. So, I mean, I misspelled my own last name on a draft that I tried to publish. I didn't publish that part, but I did misspell my own last name. So, I mean, it worries me.
The right way, even though it's typed the wrong way, because we're trained to see things the way that we need them to be, not the way that they are when it comes to language. And that's where, like, dyslexia really gets you, because, like, I'll leave out vowels, and me have a big issue. I'll leave out vowels. Things will be backwards. Some letters will be upside down if I'm long-handing. And it's a struggle, but I do love doing novels. And I had, like, a serialized novella collection. It was like a trilogy, really. It was called the Embracing Entropy Series. And I worked really hard on that. And I found a great, like, indie publisher that had just started. And unfortunately, when you're dealing with indie publishers, they're not always as knowledgeable as they need to be. And the CEO, she was trying to do too much, and she, the company isn't really publishing anything anymore. But you could see as she was editing each different section, it kind of started getting less and less focused, and it's out of print now. And I'm sitting here going, man, I need to get that to a good publisher again.
That's the best part about this indie thing that's available now, is that you can be the publisher.
I know.
Can you do everything? I mean, I don't know. That we just talked about marketing. To me, it's voodoo. It's like witchcraft or something. I'm not exactly sure how to do SEO. I'm not necessarily certain that there's a way to actually do it to benefit myself. I publish stuff on my website all the time, and it's like, is there magic to get people to come to you, or is it just the discovery that people have over and over again saying, fine, I'm going to subscribe? I have no clue.
Well, and
I should probably be more knowledgeable.
Publishing, like I did self-publish like a kid's book a long time, and I don't really speak about it because I took it down because my daughter was joking. I wrote a story and I illustrated it with terrible pictures, and she was like, "Mommy, I want to read it on your Kindle." So I was like, "Fine, I'll self-publish it." I sold like 10 copies. Woohoo! But after that, I got into the indie scene and speculative fiction. Everybody's writing it. It's such a flooded market, and like I've had a few breaks with it, but it's always because I knew somebody. Oh, this person on Facebook is a friend of this person, and they like the idea of me, not my story, and so they wanted me to be in this anthology. And so the politics behind that make me kind of.
Yeah.
So I pulled back on trying to get into mainstream speculative fiction, because to me, like, my nonfiction, I have had super success with it. I have columns. I have a column with LitReactor. I have a column with Which Way magazine. I've been in a Chicken Soup for the Soul book. So I've had my stuff in magazines and publications, like in a Barnes and Noble, without me having to do anything. But when it comes to speculative fiction, breaking into like Clark's World magazine or Sci-Fi and Fantasy magazine or any of those big ticket names, it's so hard.
It's really impossible. Have you ever?
Submissions.
Have you ever gotten that far?
The farthest, I guess the best success I had with speculative fiction, I would say it's a tie. I won Author of the Year at Bards and Sages, which was really great. I had a story with them called Gold Bands, and it was like this crazy story that I wanted to center around like this man whose wife was trapped inside of an eel, and it could only eat wedding rings. He was trying to find the right wedding ring to break this curse and bring her back to her normal self. And I wrote that right after I got divorced because I pawned my wedding ring. And I wanted to write this story about this pawn shop owner who like takes people's wedding rings, and he's not taking them because he wants to, it's because he's trying to get his wife back.
Interesting. I like it. That's a nice idea. You'd probably deserve to win that year.
It's a good year, but it's kind of a tie because I got into a couple of anthologies with Crystal Lake Publishing. Because
I know Crystal Lake.
Yeah.
Actually, I've had something in Crystal Lake before.
Yeah, everybody has a connection to Crystal Lake. They're all right. But I was in the Fantastic Tales of Terror anthology with my Annie Oakley Wendigo Hunter story. It was like historical figures, but with like speculative fiction elements. So I was like, what if Annie Oakley, the sharpshooter, was like a hunter of Wendigos? I love monster stories, but I don't want to do like vampires, zombies, the normal stuff. I like the weird little things that haven't been tapped into as much.
I love that. Is a Wendigo a Native American spirit?
Native American. It's basically it's a tale to warn people from cannibalism. So you turn into this monstrous Wendigo creature. It's almost like an evil, like deer tree, if you eat human flesh. And I love that. And I have a little bit of Native American in me. I mean, I wasn't raised on a reservation or anything, and my knowledge of the who was Native American, my grandpa's grandma, is very limited. But I've always been curious about it. So I wanted to write something like that. that involved that kind of mythology.
Oh, I love it. I write about that stuff too, actually. A bunch. I love the Lenape happenings in my area, the Manhattan situation. Love the Native American history around here. I was devastated in college. I took a class about Native American history, and it just started in 1492. You know, it was like, hey, the Europeans showed up. Now we can have a history. And I was so sad. I was like, what about all these thousands of years? We don't care. I mean, we can guess. We have the hieroglyphics in South America. I mean, we can point to them and say they might mean this, but nobody knows anything really. I mean, we know they killed people left and right, and the people they killed voluntarily jumped into those pits. They weren't dragged there unwillingly. We have no clue really why, though. And it's like, I really want to know it. So I write about it. I really just want to dig into it. Because I write speculative fiction, though. I want that magical element as well, though, that spiritual element. That, you know, the coyotes, the tricksters, and things like that.
Yeah. Well, that's what, for the Annie Oakley story, I put Sitting Bull in it. He was this amazing.
Love it. Yeah, how could you not? I said, yeah, that's great. Why? You have to. That would be how you to write that story. Sitting Bull would have to be there.
Knew him. He was kind of like a father figure to her, along with Buffalo Bill, or Wild Bill. So you have like these great characters in her life that were real people who did these amazing things, and you just put that speculative element, and then it became this awesome historical fiction story. And that book specifically, I am proud of, because Neil Gaiman's in it too. You know, I'm alongside big names.
That's so awesome! Wow, congratulations with that.
They were like, we're not supposed to use his name to promote it, and I'm like, I'm not doing that. The book came out a while ago.
Oh, that's interesting. So he was in this thing and he said you can't use his name?
Yeah, so I guess with indie publishing or something like that, because it's so small scale, and they're, or maybe, I don't know what the whole deal was. I was kind of on the back end of that. But we were told, you know, we're not using his name to promote the book. You need to use yourself to promote the book. I'm like, okay, I can do that.
And that was Crystal Lake?
Yeah, that was Crystal Lake. I had to distance myself from them, and there was an NDA, so I'm not allowed to talk about it, but there was a little bit of a tiff going on with them. And
it's so sad, isn't it? I mean, that's the world that we live in. Yeah. I think lawyers are really important to a certain degree. I mean, John Adams is an interesting historical lawyer, right? He defended the British and the Boston Massacre or whatever. I think it's important to have somebody who can argue things. But my God, man, we are so drowning in people worried about getting sued, or this is my intellectual property. I mean, that goes right back to how do you make money with writing and getting stuff out there? People steal your ideas.
Fiction is where I'm finding the most lucrative area right now.
What's that?
Nonfiction has been my most endeavor. But the fun thing about nonfiction is that you can write about speculative fiction on a nonfiction platform, and then you can draw, you know, a little bit of income from that, and then, you know, release the stories that are really dear to you in the speculative fiction realm for free, which is what I've been doing recently.
Can you go into the nonfiction marketplaces that you're getting paid from? How you're getting the jobs, or how you're getting the articles, or whatnot, the ideas? 5 questions. You want me to narrow it down to one at a time? How are you finding the markets that are paying nonfiction wise?
I am a search hound. I do research at my work, so I am constantly researching what is doing well, who is looking for who, and where can I get in. And there was a situation with LitReactor where I just happened to follow somebody on Twitter who was following the editor, and they were asking, you know, they said, hey, if you want to be a columnist for us, send us, you know, your pitch, your idea, whatever, email it to us, and we'll tell you if you like it or not. And so I was like, I'm doing this today. You really can't. Like, you have to jump on it right away, because 1,000 other people will jump on it, and if you're the first one there, they're going to pick you up faster if you're the best skilled one.
And you said you found that through something called LitReactor?
LitReactor, yeah, they're a website, and it's just a writing website where we write articles about, technique, skills, plotting, character. We do book reviews. I personally prefer to pitch ideas to do literary birthdays. I love writing about the writers who influenced me. So, like, I wrote, and I'm not big on poetry, but Maya Angelou was a huge one for me. So I wrote about her this month because her birthday, I think it was the 4th. And then next month, I already submitted my article about Patrick Dennis, who wrote the Anti-Mame series. He was crazy.
You went with Maya Angelou over William Shakespeare?
I did. You know what? I'm going to get in big trouble for this. I am not a huge fan of Shakespeare.
I got to let you go. I can't talk to you anymore.
I'm not. I just feel like some of the stories are very immature and they're poetic, but they're just kind of.
I don't know. I find him incredibly boring. Like you, I never want to sleep more than during a Shakespeare play or while reading Shakespeare for that matter. But at the same time, it tickles me. It tickles me so much. I just love the idea of Shakespeare and what he's managed to accomplish. I guarantee he was mostly illiterate. You know what I mean? If you've ever read those old explorer guys that came to America and wrote their journals, they're constantly misspelled things all throughout. There was no grammar.
I understand anything in there because it's all terrible spelling and it's
all sucks. Yeah, I mean, that's Shakespeare's contemporaries. And they were educated, they went to the Naval Academy. They were the smart ones. And then here's Shakespeare. I'm the gardener. What was he? He was the shoemaker's son. He was the cobbler's son. He was somebody's son in the Merchant Guild or something. And he didn't go to school for anybody's or any time at all.
I don't remember. I'm so terrible. We did so much Shakespeare in high school. We read Romeo and Juliet in two different. And I think
we're the same age. I think we're the exact same age, actually. Romeo and Juliet. I think we took Macbeth. I think we did Twelfth Night, Hamlet.
Cool. It's kind of cool. I liked how his Macbeth's, the queen, she turned him into this crazy monster, and then she's like, she feels like she's, what was the line? Something about she feels like she bloodied the ocean, by just putting a few drops.
I'm saying, man, there's stuff in Shakespeare that comes out that just resonates, and that's why it never goes away. I mean, Macbeth, Hamlet, damn that play.
Man, Hamlet drives me nuts, though. He's such a whiny little brat,
Like, we all, though, get a splinter, get a flu, get a cold, or a sore throat. We all become this whiny little asshole that can't stop complaining about something that we have no control over. His mom married his dad's brother, right? Is that the deal? How much that suck?
Sure, if I in Hamlet's shoes, I'd be an asshole too.
Right? I mean, he's suicidal. His dad died. Mom, dude, you're with his murderer. Everything. So good. I mean, yeah, it might suck. The language is so archaic. You can't follow it, really. It's as bad as Beowulf almost.
I love epics, so I should love Shakespeare, but his stuff isn't epic. It's more, and I like character stuff usually, but I think it's more plot driven. It's more like, let's get them here so they can die now. And I'm like, come on, dude. Like, really?
What is it? It's all about that verse, right? It's all about standing up there like Hamilton, being that play on Broadway. It's not the story of Alexander Hamilton. That was an actual book that was 1,000 pages long. This is a lot of fun. It's a lot of guys getting together and using the idea of Alexander Hamilton to tell you a really neat story for 2.5 hours or whatever. That's what Shakespeare was doing.
Some rockin' songs.
Right? It's badass. I mean, what you could do with it. I think it's the epitome of art because it can translate in so many different ways.
Well, and that's what I
think Maya Angelou is on that list too because, she resonates as well. It's interesting that, what was she, the poet laureate during Clinton's time, right?
Yeah.
She transcends race at this point. She's dead, right? She died 5 or 6 years ago.
Well, she died. Oh God, I just wrote about her. I'm so terrible. I'm not good at dates. I'm really not great. What I gathered from like everything that I've learned of her and read from her and seen of her, from my childhood and onward is that she was so much more than just a poet. She, we always, everybody shares her poems and her verses, but she wrote nonfiction books about her life that really draw you in and make you feel for her without making her seem like a victim. Like she was a survivor, but she was also like, she started out as a dancer. She was a singer. She did Broadway. She did screenplays. She did everything. She was an artist, and that's what made her so universal, is that she connected with so many different types of creativity, creative energies, without even trying. It just came out of her naturally, and she followed it, and these doors opened for her, and she took them, and she went. And that's why I wanted to write about her, because so many people know of her as just a poet, and from a nonfiction standpoint, that's how I really know her. I love, her stories about her life, the caged bird, and the metaphors that she uses. But learning about her dancing, I looked up all these old pictures of her, because if you look online, if you look up Maya Angelou, there are all these stoic pictures of this old lady with gray in her hair and a poem next to it. And that wasn't her. If you look up who she was when she first started, she had these beautiful, there was this one picture that absolutely just grabbed me. It's her dancing by a fire outside. And she looks so young and graceful and so alive. And like, that's the Maya Angelou I think of when I read her writing, or when I, pull up some of her old recordings and things like that. That's the Maya Angelou that I know of. And so when I think about writing, or when I think about speculative fiction or any kind of like creative endeavor, it's that kind of spirit that I always hope to convey. You don't want to push yourself into a box. I mean, you have to narrow it down so you can market yourself and whatnot, but you have to let the story kind of take over and captivate.
You have to narrow it down? You think you have to actually pigeonhole yourself like that?
I don't know. I tried to do different genres with different pen names for a while.
Genres in what way? Like, we talk about speculative fiction. It's an umbrella term that has a lot of different things underneath it. When I write speculative fiction myself, I write historical fiction, I write fantasy a little bit, and there's a lot of things in fantasy too. You have high fantasy and low fantasy, and science fiction is mainly what I work with, right? So it's all speculative fiction.
And horror gets lumped in there too.
Yeah. Love it. Bro, I mean, you can even put like, I don't think mysteries necessarily, right? No, not mysteries, not crime stories necessarily.
If there's any kind of like magical element or supernatural floating around in the background, it'll get shoved into speculative fiction. So it's such a broad genre, and it's not even genre. You're right; it's a blanket term. That.
So I mean, when you write in multiple genres, are you considering yourself still writing with sort of romance, speculative fiction, and literary fiction?
I felt like for the longest time, I felt like it was hindering me to try and do everything under the same name. So I did try to branch off and like use different names, and all of my pen names have always been linked to my legal name. And it's funny because like Jessica Marie Baumgartner is now a pen name, because that was my married name with my first husband. And I have so much work under it that I have to keep the name, which is a little annoying to me. But I tried, writing under my maiden name. I tried writing under my mother's maiden name on different genres. And the literary fiction did really well at first. But after a while, it just kind of petered out. And I don't know how or why, but it just kind of like the acceptances. That first like 6 months to a year that I switched over to that name under literary fiction, I had an acceptance like every other week. And I was getting, I wasn't making huge bank, but I was making a good amount. And then something happened, and it was just like, nope.
Like what time frame though? What was this, a decade ago? Was it 2 decades ago?
Oh, it was about
yesterday.
It was about right around the time that I got divorced. I was trying to see if I could get away from my married name. Not that my ex-husband is that terrible, but like I was ready to leave that behind. Like,
Interesting, because what we're talking about, 2007 is like a really awful year. Honestly, that's when Facebook came out. It's like
God.
when July 2007, I remember a girl that saying to me, "Hey, have you ever heard of Facebook?" And I said, "No, what is it?" "Well, you need a college email address, and you can basically just hook up with all your friends and be blah 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 blah." So I did. I had a college email address, so I set it up, and it was like one of the first people on Facebook.
Oh
And
my,
it turned into the horrible, horrible thing that it is today. And what was that? That was 13 years ago. And we're talking about right at the same time frame, iPhones were coming out just a few years later on. And that really what sent this horrible thing into motion, the social media craze.
the
If
social
you're
media has definitely been like a wave that I've had to learn to surf. Like, because there's a lot of connections. All of my really good connections have been made through social media. All of the
so
great,
connections, you
yeah.
seem very affable. Do you consider yourself an extrovert? Or are you more innerly
For
directed? Are you an extrovert?
people, I like going around. I mean, I'm a little bipolar, so there are days where if you come near me, you're going to be in trouble. Don't come near me. But I'm usually that person who I'm out and I'm bubbly and I just want to, skip through the rainbows and laugh with people.
Well, yeah, that's good, right? So you mean don't come near me unless you want to laugh and have a good time.
Yes, I have an issue with people who take themselves too seriously because I just feel like that's so stuck up and you kind of close yourself off. There's this weird stereotype in all writing that you have to write your pain. And I really don't believe that. I believe that all strong emotions create that energy that helps you to write a masterpiece. And pain is the easiest strong emotion. It's so easy when you're in pain to write something. When you're so like elated with joy, it's hard to sit down and write something, but that's still an energy that can create something amazing. You just have to hone in on it. And it's just like, when you're having a really bad day and you're just mad and you want to throw something at the wall. Like, that's not necessarily your pain. That's just you having a rough time.
I cannot write when I feel self-pity. I can't.
Eh,
When I feel like I'm a bad guy, when I feel like I've done something wrong, when I feel like the world is against me, I cannot write. I just feel like an asshole when I do. So usually I have to be in like a neutral mood to get it to bubble forth.
Well, and that kind of gives you the opportunity to write fair. If you're only writing your pain, if you're basing it off of the people around you, you might not write them very fairly.
I mean, the goal is not to write autobiographical fiction, right? I mean, you want to kind of remove yourself. The authorial voice is going to be there regardless, but you want to kind of remove it as much as possible and let the characters come forward a little bit. So they are the things that stand out and pull the story forward. I mean, that's what I've been trying to find in my own work, all these characters that just drag the plot along with them as they go.
Right. Something completely new and different that you don't
It is not the stupid asshole who lived 43 years, however he lived 43 years. You know what I mean? That guy's boring to me. I want some excitement.
I agree. And that's I think that humor is lacking in speculative fiction. That's why I like Stephen King. He writes when he writes the more like horror type stuff with monsters and whatnot, he always sprinkles a joke in there.
I think so too. Right? A cultural thing that you can latch onto as the reader and go, ha ha ha. I know what he's saying. He's so interesting to me because he doesn't do genres. He's written multiple books a year. He violates every rule the publishing industry has made up for itself.
He wants, and he's earned that right, though. Us piddly, they're small name authors, pardon me. We have to earn that right, I think, and that's a long, hard road.
I don't know. I mean, you look at Herman Melville, right? The guy wrote one good book. And that wasn't the only damn thing he wrote either. He wrote one book that we're aware of and sat at a desk and died there. I don't even think he was aware of no, he wasn't. In fact, he published the book, died, and then all of a sudden, every sophomore in the entire world has to read Moby Dick. You know what I mean? How extraordinary is that? This guy's gone, and he's a legend.
And you know,
Does that happen?
I automatically go, "Call me Ishmael" in my head, because that's like the most memorable opening line next to like, "It was the best of times and it was the worst of times," you know.
Not a failure. Same thing as Edgar Allan Poe. I mean, maybe it's not fair because this is the advent of the American literary scene, right? These people are pioneers in something that we just talked about. The guy who's doing it now, as great as a person can do it, Stephen King. These people are scratching at nothing, putting their words out for people to steal. I mean, they were just stealing these people's work.
With very little, standards anywhere. I kind of,
I mean,
I
they
guess,
laughed at the English. Hi, that's not literature. So yeah, Maya Angelou. I have not really experienced much of her work. I wonder though if that's because I don't know. Maybe it's a cultural thing.
Say it is she did write very much from the feminine perspective. So if you're where you want to kind of understand the women in your life a little better, read a little Maya Angelou. But if it's not your thing and you'd rather, read like a mystery or a thriller, like I don't feel like anybody should have to be forced to read anything that doesn't fit, what their tastes are. But I put her into like one of those, like, to me she's like one of those creative gods or muses that are like floating around out there going, "Hey, that energy's still there. Pick it up, people."
I've recently discovered that I really enjoy poetry. I just really enjoy occasionally finding something that's just really awesome and having it just, work its way into your brain. Emily Dickinson, or who wrote The Wasteland? Been definitely reading that a little bit recently. So, I mean,
you're getting into poetry because I have a strong dislike of poetry in the modern sense, like the stuff it's all like relationship garbage, or it looks like, a lot of stuff that's out there reads like it came out of a teenager's love note journal or something.
Yeah, I have just this vague imagery of the modern day poet being a 35-year-old white man with a beard sitting in a coffee shop. And I just instantly get very irritated. Or the girl with the black fingernail polish, and she's gothy and depressed and sad. I just don't like it. But when I think about back in the day, they had a really hard time writing and developing things. I guess I don't know why poetry is the way it is. I even took a lot of classes that tell me how that.
Oh yeah.
The way it is. I don't know anything.
Everybody doesn't know anything though. Like, we think we know things, but we don't really know. But when it comes to poetry, like my take on poetry is the short form doesn't do it for me. It's like the opposite, like, of me in speculative fiction. Like my fantasy, my sci-fi, all of my horror, I prefer the short stories. I love writing them. I'm highly influenced by Ray Bradbury. I like Charles DeLint, Neil Gaiman. I like the short stuff because you don't have to force characters to keep going and keep going. I hate that. But
well, you know what it is for me? I love short fiction because it's the same exact thing that you're doing when you write a novel. You're just abbreviating it. Like, I read recently, there's a method that you can write a short fiction piece in 3 parts, 1,500 words, 1,500 words, 1,500 words, or maybe it's 4 parts. There's another one. There's a conclusion. And it's really formulaic as well, right? But if you look at that 6,000 words, that's what a section of a novel would be like too. It builds up, it drops you into the second part, it builds up, it drops you into the third part, it builds up, and you continue to build up until the crescendo of the piece, and then boom, you're done. And I just love it because, I mean, honestly, those short fiction pieces become something bigger eventually, unless you sell them.
They do. They have so much to say, but like with poetry, I'm the opposite. I don't like short poems about flowers and love. I love epics. I want to read Faust. If I'm going to read something, I want to read like crazy old like German poetry about selling your soul to the devil.
Right. From Rilke or something.
Like,
I don't know. I don't like translations at all. But I agree. It would be so neat to be able to read in those languages, the poetry and how it's supposed to actually say and read.
lost there, but the story remains. That's something that, like, for me, it's just like, you know, the Iliad and the Odyssey were like my first real epic introduction, and I read them when I was in high school, and I was just, I didn't like the Iliad so much as I loved the Odyssey because I like connecting with Odysseus and his journey, and man, his dog waited 20 years for him to return home, and there's that scene where his dog's like, this is a spoiler if nobody's read it, but you know, he finally returns to his land, and his dog is waiting for him, this old, decrepit dog who refused to die. And he gets off there, and he pets the dog, and the dog is just so happy to see him, and then he lays down and dies. And, like, that, to me, is the epitome of writing. Like, there's nothing more poetic than a dog who refuses to die until his master comes home, and then as soon as he's home and he knows he's okay, he can let go.
God, man, I've heard that story so many times, too. And now you tell me there's a dog, and I'm like, oh, there's a dog. It's funny how things can catch on, too. I mean, I was just talking to somebody else about this as well, how as the writer of a story, you can't own where that story is going to end up with the reader at all. I mean, I've written stuff spur of the moment, 300 to 1,000 words, and just posted it on Reddit or something along those lines. And I've had people just go out of their way to say how good it was. And then I read it back in a month or two. I'm like, damn, really? You thought this was good? There's mistakes in it. There's errors. It's horrible. I think it's embarrassing, but there was like 1,000 people that said, Jesus, man, I'm going to spend money on rewards that you understand how good this piece is. I had honestly, I barely put any effort into that thing, and they loved it.
Matter if there's a mistake because they liked what you had to say. That's what really matters, is the message came through. When you convey the message properly, you have done your job as an author. You have done your job as a writer, and like you can pat yourself on the back and you know, kind of not hate yourself for a minute.
Didn't the dog in the Odyssey, though, have something to do with his being discovered to be the real Odysseus, though?
Wait, the dog was the one who recognized him. Everybody else thought he was like this like beggar or this merchant or this, you know, he was just this dirty old man who came on the boat. So like,
and the dog is like, hey, this is Odysseus. And everybody's like, oh, yo, the dog. He thinks this is Odysseus. That's our boy. So yeah, the dog was incredibly important. It's such a great plot device. I mean, it's interesting how we're so connected back to the Greeks, how they were trying to entertain. And I mean, that story is interesting because we don't even know who actually wrote it. We don't know if Homer actually wrote the damn thing. It could just be one of those oral tradition things that kept getting passed and passed down. But what's that?
That's the theory, is that he didn't create the story. He just wrote it down. It's just like the Brothers Grimm. You know, they didn't write those stories.
They transcribed them.
Right.
And it's also interesting to me, the Iliad, the place they went to rescue whatever her face is.
Oh God! Wait.
But that place is something that archaeologists disagree whether it actually exists or not. It could just be a complete figment of some culture's imagination. I mean, it's fascinating why we decided to do this. It makes no earthly sense. What we do as writers will be gone, like dust in the wind. And I wonder, seriously, when I sit in front of this stupid story that I have to edit the crap out of, why do I bother? Because really nobody, but maybe a couple thousand people, 10,000, if I'm lucky, right? 30,000 people, 100 million, let's just say 1 million people. If I just win the lottery and they want to buy this story, read it. In the scope of humanity, it doesn't matter if it was a test. Everybody who was ever a human being got tested on my work, and 1 million people read it. Humanity would still fail on that subject. You know what I mean? 1 million people is not going to cut it. There's been 35 billion people in our species history. 1 million people is not going to make us past the subject of who Brian Hale wrote a novel about. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Well, and it's so weird because like that, in that scheme, like when you're looking at the grand scheme of writing and where your place in it is, it can be discouraging at times because you're like, how does my voice be heard at all?
Yeah.
But there's
why
also,
does my voice matter, or what am I doing with this? It's so, somebody called it incrementalism. I think it was Garrett Robinson. I've done a few podcasts in the last week. I've been, this isolationist. You know what we have not done in 50 minutes is talk about coronavirus.
Oh,
We did it once. There was one comment you made about the quarantine. I was going to jump into it, but we went someplace else. I mean, I think that we deserve some congratulations.
Everybody's talking about it. I don't like talking about what everybody else is talking about. It gets old and it gets boring, and I feel like we've talked so much about coronavirus. But in my little corner of the world, like my husband's paranoid and I'm kind of a survivalist. So like we have a third of an acre. We kind of grow some of our own food. We have a giant backyard. We've been gardening. Like our life hasn't really changed that much. We can't go to a movie or go out to eat if we want. We can't have a party or a barbecue right now, but it hasn't been so bad. I mean, a writer's life is pretty simple, you know, like I miss my adventure.
I'm ground zero. It's kind of interesting. I am in ground zero of the coronavirus thing. It is absolutely mind-boggling to me that 20,000 of my neighbors are dead. I can't fucking believe it. Honestly, it just really just drives me crazy. It seeps into my brain. There's like 20,000 people out there that have died in the last month or two. And then the idea that 1/5 the people that I call neighbors had this thing called coronavirus. And what you said in March, we weren't feeling good. That was me in February. My wife too, and both of my children.
Yep.
Like all of us were fucking dead. We just felt so bad.
Laying in bed going,
oh man, I had the worst fever, the worst chills. I hurt so bad. I woke up in the middle of the night and took a hot bath. Mm-hmm. And the moment that I got out of bed, I shivered until I got into the freaking tub, and I got out of the tub and shivered until I got back into bed. Yep. So I have never been that sick in my life, I don't think. And
that's really bad. And like that's why I wrote that singer story about the tree root thing, because I wrote the story about a singer who kills her
actually,
and is never again.
It's poetic, actually, the connection, because we are connected by these little roots of disease. It's interesting that maybe we both have the same disease. I mean, it happens every year, doesn't it? I mean, the flu does hit people every single year in the same way, but not to this devastation.
Now, though, people are like, "Oh, the flu's here. Oh, whatever," and it's because it's new and it's different. Like we have this wave of uncertainty just washed over us, and everybody.
Well, it's different than that, isn't it? The flu, you get a vaccine, and even the people who don't get a vaccine are protected by the herd who do get the vaccine. So this thing, there is no vaccine for it, so everybody's going to get it. You know what I mean? There's not going to be any herd
if they want it, and that is disconcerting for anybody who's highly alarmed by this or anybody who's at risk.
Mm-hmm.
And
I think this. I mean, you don't know. It's so interesting. I mean, I'll be laying here, I'll be watching a movie or something or writing, and there'll just be sirens, and there's nothing else. The streets are empty. I don't know if you've seen the news. You probably have. You've seen the videos. It's a ghost town. Whereas, you walk down, there's never an inch on the sidewalk that you can actually walk on without thinking, am I stepping in somebody's way? Now there's just homeless people. And it's so bad because they're the ones that are always muttering to themselves, and there's something wrong. And why are you standing in the rain? What's wrong with you on the sidewalk? Why are you moaning like that? That's the people that are out on the sidewalks right now. People desperately running to the grocery store, and this horrible, horrible nightmare of homeless people. And they're slowly dying. My God, I just walked under a bridge, and all I saw is suitcases. Those rolly suitcases and buggies. And they're just sitting there like somebody's collecting them and putting them in this area. I've never seen that before. You know what I mean? Just hundreds and hundreds of suitcases. And they look like homeless people treasure suitcases, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. When I lived in LA, I had a park. I lived in Skid Row at the Cecil Hotel, haunted room.
Haunted room?
This park where all these homeless people just stayed all day. Just they're shopping, and they're just sitting on the benches. Just the whole park was just full of homeless people, and that it's something that kind of like you have to get used to it after a while. But I always.
It doesn't happen to you guys. You live in St. Louis, right? Is that what I read?
Outside of St. Louis. My husband, I used to live in St. Louis, and my husband talked me into moving just outside of St. Louis. So I'm still in Missouri, but it's more like spread out. So like here, Missouri's only had 200 deaths out of 6 million people. It's very spread out. People are, the metro area is a little more concerning. But like everybody here, the parks are open. Everybody's outside walking when the sun is out. Like our neighbors.
What's St. Louis? Is that 500,000 people or is it a million?
I don't know.
Big city. I've been through it one time. I was stationed at Fort Leonard Wood. That's my Missouri experience. What did I spend? I spent 3.5 months there getting trained by the United States Army. It was beautiful. I loved it. I thought it was a wonderful state. And St. Louis looked like a big city. So what was it? Do you know the population?
I don't know the population, but I know like I know the city like the back of my hand. But it's not like when I went to LA or when I've been to New York or when I've been to Chicago, there's no, like you have to look to find the trees. But like in St. Louis, everything has a lawn. Even in the city, the buildings aren't very big and there's lots of space and there's lots of greenery. So I feel like maybe that's working for us because we have all of this stuff to spread us out a little bit, even in the city.
Maybe. I hope they stopped it in Lima, honestly. Because I mean, it's been here for a while. It's been here for a long time. It's been here since January, maybe even December. Slowly working its way through this. I mean, my kids went to a school with a bunch of, Chinese immigrant kids. And what I mean, I got sick. Everybody was sick. Everybody in that school was sick. And just this news, I don't understand how we're not getting any information at all. I think it's just because we're old now. Maybe it was the same situation when we were kids, just not getting any information at all, and we didn't care. But now it's like,
and journalistic integrity is kind of gone in the media right now. So I do not really trust anything that I see from a mainstream media. Most of what I'm learning from coronavirus is coming from people who've had it, or people like you who are, you're in New York, you're dealing with it every day. And that's why I'd rather go on social media and talk to people who are posting pictures than see that Yahoo News posted a picture of a store completely wiped out, and then you see somebody taking a picture of the people who took everything off the shelves to make it look like it was wiped out. And I'm like,
and then that toilet paper thing, what in the name of God is going on with the toilet paper being gone? That makes no earthly sense. Toilet paper. You can't make a lot of toilet paper. What are you buying all this toilet paper for?
Just use a washcloth. Get over it.
That's the thing, right? It doesn't make any sense that it's gone. It's like, who stockpiles? As a survivalist, are you stockpiling toilet paper? You're not, right? You can wash your freaking ass in water. You don't need to have toilet paper.
Water?
Water, exactly. All you need. It doesn't have to be clean water. It can be dirty water.
I'm pregnant right now, and I went on
Congratulations. How far along are you?
I am almost 20 weeks. I'm almost halfway there. So we're getting along. But I had a moment in the middle of all of this where I had to go through and I had to pack all the backpacks in case we all had to leave in the middle of the night or something.
Right? I mean, I don't have a go bag. I don't have one. I mean, I was thinking about it today. What would I want to take if I really, really desperately wanted to take something? It would be like my hard drive or something. I'm like, yeah, just leave it. Everything's on the cloud. That really is important.
I'm in there. I'm grabbing as many books of matches. I have matches everywhere, books of matches everywhere. And I have where are all my pocket knives? I'm I gotta put this pocket knife in this bag and this. I also was trained as a community emergency response team member years ago. So I was at the firehouse with these guys who were at ground zero at 9/11 telling us, when the next disaster arrives, if help can't get there for 3 days like it did with Katrina, then you have to be the people who can be there. So I am always on that level where I'm oh my God, am I going to have to be that person? And what
got me though is you need a gallon of water per person. A gallon of water. So right now, if Katrina happened, what'd you say, 3 days? We need 3 gallons of water in this house to survive.
Yep.
And when it's 12 gallons of water for my family in my house to survive. Okay, it doesn't matter. I can't prep enough to be prepared.
Because
eventually do it.
Run out. That's your 3-day supply. Then what do? Do you move on?
You do.
Okay. And to me, it's that's an instinct thing. You're going to have to deal with that situation. I want a rain barrel so bad. I keep talking about it. It used to be illegal, and it's still.
I was going to say, are you allowed to do it? Because a lot of places, I didn't know. I grew up in Florida. My mom had a rain barrel. We had a giant barrel filled with water as a kid. and she used it for gardening. She used it all the time. It's like, that's normal for me, a rain barrel. And then I found out like a few years ago, some places won't let you have it. You can't have your rain barrel, guys. You got to pay the municipal for their water. You can't collect your own. No. So stupid. I hate it so much. That just drives. I was like, my God, why don't we have a government? So you can tell me I can't collect rainwater? That's why you exist?
Big home birther too. I don't like hospitals for babies. Like I push them out in my house, and that was illegal up until
that's on you. You're the lady, but I definitely told my wife I think we should go to the doctor for this. All medical stuff. Just have a doctor.
Yeah.
Scared. We were definitely very scared.
You have to trust your gut and do what's best for you, but it's so strange to see the different reactions that people are having, because I know people who are just absolutely just locked in their houses with Lysol everywhere, and then like I'm still going hiking and fishing. I'm just trying to go when nobody else is out. Like if it's raining, I'm like, oh, I could take a walk now.
That's the thing, right? It's all about that social distancing. If you let somebody sneeze in your face, you got a good chance of getting this thing. But honestly, there are people that are saying this guy had no contact with anybody with coronavirus. He maintained social distancing, and he died 2 days ago. So basically, it's life, right? I mean, it's life. You go through it, and you hope to God that you get to an advanced enough age that you die not realizing that you're a conscious human being on its way to death. Right? Is that the ultimate goal, or
to the point that brain is soup? I really don't like. That my first stroke is just it.
Right? I mean, there's so many options. It's heart disease that'll get you first, or it's cancer, or you die of dementia. And I've heard there's some swallowing thing that goes along with dementia that scares the crap out of me. So I guess there's no good way. There's no good way. It's really bad. If it's not corona, it's going to be something else. And I think our only goal is to surf the despair being alive offers you long enough to make a difference in your incremental little way.
Offers you, that is a very sunny disposition.
Is it funny?
Not at all.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, to me, life is.
I never expected sarcasm out of Missouri, though, so you got me by surprise.
And my sarcasm is so sweet. People don't often realize that I'm using it. They're like, "Are you?" And I'm like, "No, I'm not."
That's the best use of sarcasm right there. Catch me by surprise. Really? No. Damn it. Like you could injure somebody with some really good sarcasm.
I get in trouble a lot. I do, and if I ever become like really famous, they're going to come after me because I made a few coronavirus jokes, and I was being sarcastic, but some people don't realize that. And I had this one kid who was like, I'm literally shaking at what this person said, and I'm like, oh, honey, I'm sorry.
It's awful.
In my head, I'm saying, actually. Because I'm like, my apology is never going to stop you from being mad at me. But
man, they'll find something else, either with you or somebody else.
But I did feel really bad because I'm like, that is my dark humor coming out, and that is never like my social media is me. Like I can't filter myself. Like my husband, like when we were first dating, and he was on social media and following me, he's like, you are exactly on social media like you are in real life, and that is so rare. And I'm like, that's not rare. Everybody's like, he's like, no, they're not. Really like surprised. He's like, you just don't shut up about the stuff, do you? And I'm like, nope, I will say what I'm thinking. And times I get in trouble.
Is Twitter your go-to? Is Twitter your number one social media?
Yeah, I really love Twitter just because it works with my brain. I have rapid thought, so like I think like I tweet, something will pop up in my brain, and I'm like, ooh, I can share this now instead of just keeping crazy self. But
just put out the words. What is it? 280 characters. Might as well.
That used to annoy me at first, but I like brevity. That simplicity.
Oh yeah. That's why I really got into Twitter, is the idea that I had to trim it down to 140. I was like, I have an idea, but it's not fitting. How can I make it fit? And that was the best part.
How do you condense it? How do you make it so concise that people are really going to listen?
Because I mean, what do they say at the end of the day? Good writing is brevity. Brevity brings on the best in fiction. You can get through a scene as tightly as possible. It's just the most important detail shining through. you're gonna win readership, and that's ultimately the goal.
Yes, yes. I want a picture painted, and I want to, create that, an atmosphere, but I don't want to drone on and on all hours of the day. I don't want to preach to people. I want to let them think for themselves and draw their own conclusions.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking of tons of analogies that are probably inappropriate, but you basically want to get in and out. You know what I mean? You just basically want to do what's necessary, and everybody have a good time at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and that's it. I guess for me, people are always asking that question, why do you write? And I'm like, well, I don't know what else I've always written. To me, the question should be, why do you publish? Because I will always write whether or not people are reading my work. It's part of my life. I've been telling stories since I was a little kid, but when it comes to writing stuff down and publishing it, that's to get that message out for people to read, for them to, take in and decide, does this resonate with me? Is this something that I need in my life? So,
yeah, right. I mean, that's why you write to titillate, to find the reaction. You tell a joke for the same reason. A good story is a good joke. I mean, it's basically you're working your way to a punchline. You want to make people laugh. You want to make them cry. You want to scare the crap out of them.
You want to draw emotions out. You want to make them feel and be alive. Like I feel like I'm like the anti-writer nowadays, because there's so many people who are like, writing is escapism. And I'm the opposite of that. I'm like, no, writing is supposed to make you care. It's supposed to make you feel. It's supposed to make you present in your life, so that you can draw parallels for even in a Harry Potter story. You can take something out of Harry Potter and draw a parallel to your life in a realistic setting, and use some of what you learn from his, ridiculousness, other than, like, don't go to an adult when you need help.
Harry Potter is interesting because I think it transcends modern literature. I think it's a classic. I think it's going to be with us for a very long time, like Macbeth and Hamlet and Grimm's fairy tales. I think it's just going to continue being human. Whatever she did, and I think you said, she put a lot of herself. She put a lot into that fiction. I think that's why a lot of stuff, why it's going to continue to resonate, because it's very human.
You're obsessed with Harry Potter.
Are you? I mean, I think for good reason.
Obsessed with it,
it's
but
fascinating. I mean, I get into a lot of stuff. I read a lot. Oprah book, whatever. But Harry Potter caught you, and that's a special thing. Not a lot of writing does that.
You're going to have to sit down and read the whole thing nonstop. Each of them.
Or twice.
Or just back to in a row.
It's very interesting. Well, I mean, we have had the opportunity to talk for over an hour. I really appreciate you agreeing to sit down with me. Is there anything that you want us to know about before we say goodbye?
So I talked a little bit about, the political side of speculative fiction and whatnot. I don't want anybody to ever be discouraged to not write. And when it comes to my writing particularly, I have kind of decided that speculative fiction is just for me. So I'm doing this thing called Free Fiction Fridays, where the last Friday of the month, at the very least, I am, posting a free speculative fiction story on my website, which is just my name, JessicaMarieBaumgartner.com. And I posted one today, which was the comic book one that, didn't pan out. And sometimes it's a creature feature. Sometimes it's a story about a singer who loses her voice and, hangs out with trees and things like that.
I love it, man. I love your imagination.
It's great. I like sharing it, and I feel like I've hit a point, and I kind of messaged that a little on or wrote it down on my website. I've hit a point where I am making a nice little bank off of my writing. Not how I necessarily thought I would veer. But as a thank you, I wanted to put, those free speculative fiction stories out there, because they have a lot of value to me. I feel like they're definitely, you're getting a really, really nice gift from me. They're a big part of who I am, and I really love writing them. And so putting them up there, I want people to read them. I want them to enjoy them, or tell me what they hate about them. I love feedback. I love comments.
I love interaction too. I just publish all my flash fiction for free. It's always the seeds to something bigger potentially, or it's just whatever it is. one day I'm going to collect a lot of it and get it out there on Amazon or whatever's going to happen as far as that's concerned. But yeah, my website's like, here, I did this, enjoy it.
Yes. And that's what you're sharing, a piece of yourself, and you're keeping the stories alive. And I think that is so important. And I think that that's a really great thing to do. And I hope that other people, invite me to read their stories. Anytime I see a free story, or even if it's like a 99-cent read on Twitter or something that somebody's promoting, I try to dive into it, especially if it's like indie, for sure.
Well, I mean, I thoroughly enjoyed talking with you.
Yeah,
thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.